And welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. I will hand you over to Abby to announce the housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please take instruction from staff and stewards. The assembly point is at Tudor Square. Please can I request everyone to switch mobile devices to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. The meeting today will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. While ever the meeting is open to the public, photography, video and sound recording of the proceedings is permitted. However, the Chair has discretion to withdraw or suspend this permission, for example, if the recording is disrupting the conduct of the meeting or is being undertaken in a manner which could capture personal information, or in the event that a member of the public participating in a meeting objects to being recorded. Thank you, Chair.
For the viewers and listeners at home, my name is Mike Chaplin. I'm a councillor for Southey Ward and I'm a joint chair of this committee, and so I'm chairing the meeting today. I'm now going to hand you over, to ask each member in turn to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Alan Woodcock, councillor for East Ecclesfield.
Hello, I'm Janet Riddler, councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Darnall.
Mary Lee, councillor for Darnall Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Tony Downey from Musborough Ward.
Councillor Mark Whittaker, councillor also for Stocksbridge and Upper Darnall. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name's Diane Hurst and I'm a member for Richmond Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Marion Elliott, councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Brian Holmeshaw, councillor for Bromhill and Sharrow Vale.
Good afternoon, Councillor Glynis Chapman, member for Musborough Ward.
Good afternoon, Andrew Sanger, councillor for Wood Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Williams. I represent the Staniforth Ward. I'm here as a substitute today for Councillor Woodcroft.
Thank you for that, Richard. We've received apologies for absence from Councillors Nicky Belfield, with Mary Lee substituting, Councillor Henry Nottage, with Councillor Brian Holmeshaw substituting, Councillor Woodcraft, as was said previously, with Councillor Richard Williams substituting, and Councillor Willis Marshall. I believe Councillor Weatherall has also sent apologies, which is why we have you with us today, Diane.
Most certainly, Chair. I'm sorry, I did send the apologies through to Gary, to Abby, and copied Gary in this morning when he rang me up saying he was poorly, but obviously didn't make the list. Sorry.
I will let officers introduce themselves as and when they are speaking to the reports. Moving on, so that was effectively item 2. Item 3, exclusion of the press and public. There are no items that require that. On declarations of interest, item 4. Are there any members who wish to declare an interest in any of the items of business on the agenda? Councillor Holmeshaw.
Hello, it's not actually an item of interest, but it's just a clarification that I am the councillor for one of the public footpaths that is being assessed today, but no one has been in touch with me about the application. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Excuse me, sorry, Brian, can you just clarify which one?
I don't think it's got a number, Abby. I can't spot one on here.
So the one that's not in Darnall ward.
Number 9, yeah.
Do I have to declare an interest? I'm in Darnall ward and one of the footpaths is in my ward.
You're perfectly at liberty to say that you are a councillor that represents that ward. Move on to item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. So I'm going to ask members to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting for the Planning and Highways Committee held on the 19th of August this year. Are members happy to approve the minutes? Thank you. Item 6, site visits. The date of the next site visit is to be advised, but as you know, it's usually the day before the next planning committee. So, now we come to some business. Item 7, deferred item from Planning and Highways Committee held on the 19th of August 2025, proposed conversion of a public footpath to a shared footpath, cycle track between Wilfrid Road and Shirland Lane, Darnall in Sheffield 9.
Thank you, Chair. Members will see in the agenda that there's a list in the form of an addendum addressing questions that were raised at the last meeting and following that meeting. Hopefully those are fairly straightforward. But in addition to one of the comments, I've got some additional information. So the question around how many trees will need to be felled. I've said that it's likely to do a removal of 4 or 5 trees. To mitigate this, there will be a total of 20 trees planted within the Darnall area.
Does that finish your report, or was there anything else you wish to add?
I've nothing else to add, but quite happy to take any more questions if members have got any.
Thank you. There are no speakers speaking for or against the application, so I'm going to open it up to members to ask any questions. I see Mary, you have a question.
Question is about, I've got a couple of them and a few comments, but can you just explain why the cycle track wasn't taken just up to Staniforth, up to Shirland Lane and have a left turn there from Wilfrid Road rather than making use of the footpath? Because the corner of Wilfrid Road and Shirland Lane is just 10 yards or so from that footpath.
Okay, that is one of the responses I did put in the addendum, but the thinking behind this is that if they don't put it across that area, it's likely that cyclists will take the shortest route regardless of whether there's an order in place or not. Doing so would potentially be more dangerous to pedestrians because that widened path wouldn't have been provided. Yeah, and so the cycle track at this location provides the most direct route between Wilfrid Road and Shirland Lane. I appreciate it's only a short distance, but cyclists will take that shorter distance rather than go around the long way.
You mentioned in the appendix about more consultation that you intend to write to the relevant properties. Can we just bear in mind that some of those people, English is not the first language, and maybe you need to have an interpreter or get the right language in your letters to those residents. So that's one point. You mentioned venues where consultation took place. One was the Olympic Legacy Park, and one was Hope Centre, I think it was. Those are a fair distance from that particular area, and I can't see, knowing that perhaps that people would attend those venues for any consultation, and if there's going to be consultation in the future, can we have it as close to where we're talking about as possible?
Right, answer to your first question, we will endeavour to try and send out an interpreted version of the order if that's possible. So I can't comment on why those 2 locations were chosen for the consultation. In terms of the cycle path consultation, that will be addressed to, as you've said, to all immediately affected residents. and notices posted on site. I think I've also said that we will also post an additional notice that will show the actual design of the path rather than just what would normally be just a straight black line on a on a plan.
And the other point I was going to make, there's some businesses at the other end of Shirland Lane, that on the corner of Shirland Lane and Staniforth Road. Are those businesses at risk because of the one-way system that you're going to install there as well?
That's not part of this proposal. That's part of the traffic regulation orders, which is a complex separate item.
Okay, that's me done.
Thank you, Mary. Has anyone else got any questions? Glynis.
Thank you, Chair. In this report, on 4.4, I find that a little bit confusing, where it's saying this footpath will then become to be a highway and shall become a highway over which public have a right-of-way on pedal cycles, other than pedal cycles which are motor vehicles. Does that mean you can't use electric bikes on there? I'm not quite sure what that means. When does a pedal cycle become a motor vehicle?
Thank you, Chair. The threshold over which a electric bike becomes a motor vehicle is related to its motive power. So there's a certain threshold where the amount of output that the engine is capable of delivering goes beyond being something which isn't a motor vehicle to becoming a motor vehicle. So I couldn't speak to every electric bike, depends on its engine size, but I would imagine that most electric bikes wouldn't fall within that category of motor vehicle, so as to be restricted.
I'm not quite sure how you're going to police that.
Was that? I don't know if that was rhetorical. What I was going to say was that clearly we know some people can adapt electric motors, but they would be driving those or moving on those illegally. And similarly, it also rules out mopeds, I would have thought, and motorbikes from using those cycle lanes as well. I mean, clearly if residents are seeing people misusing it in the area, they would bring that to the police's and the council's attention. Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just, on the same point actually, it's very fuzzy, if you like. It's not clear cut as to what the motorised vehicle is opposed to the non-motorised vehicle, although they've both got motors, but one's a bigger motor than the other. How can we enforce that? That's the question, really. How can we know, you know, that people, because obviously people are breaking the law if they're driving a cycle over a certain size. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The use of a motor vehicle over a highway where a person would not have a right to be able to use that motor vehicle would be an offence. It would be something that the council, in all likelihood, would not enforce. It's rarely enforced by the council. It would be a matter which could be referred to the police. They could investigate and potentially prosecute through the CPS for it. But it would be an offence. It wouldn't be something that a person would be able to do without potentially committing an offence. And insofar as the public having an indication as to whether or not they would have the right to use that particular path using a motor vehicle, that would be clearly indicated to them with signs which, without wishing to speak to the officer, would presumably have some measure of deterrent effect as well.
Are there any comments? Marianne?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I mean, I think, you know, high quality cycle routes give people more choice about how they travel, essentially, allowing people to have healthier journeys and safer communities and helping to reduce poor health and air quality. For me, it's an obvious one, so thank you. I'll be voting for.
Mary?
Yeah, just a few points really. Just in future, when we're doing consultation, can we really make sure it's as close to home as possible, close to where the area affected, because people won't travel when some of those areas, one of the venues was a bus ride away and a long car journey away. So that's one point. And when you're briefing councillors, can we be a bit more proactive rather than say, do you want a briefing? Can you book a briefing through the LAC officers? I think that would be the thing to do. And maybe we should have rather than doing these things piecemeal, we should have a whole idea of the whole route, particularly rather than just one area at a time, and you can't really join the whole, you know, that the bit about Balfour Road, Shirland Lane and Staniforth Road. I know it's going to be a one-way system down Shirland Lane, and the businesses at that end of Shirland Lane and Staniforth Road may be affected. I don't know, but it may be, and we're taking that in, someone else is making that decision somewhere else. So that's one of the things, just a couple of things that I'd like to make clear. And just going back on in terms of the letters you might write to people, there are different languages, so it might be Urdu, it might be Somali, it might be Slovakian, so just bear that in mind when you're consulting people.
Thank you, Mary. Mark, you had some comments.
Just very briefly, just to observe that there is the same sort of distinction on motorways over the engine size of motorbikes. People like me who don't use motorbikes are never quite sure about what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's something like 100cc or something, but I wouldn't know if I observed something that was 50cc over or 50cc under. But the point of it is, if the regulation is there, action can be taken against persistent offenders. Doesn't mean that people would necessarily be caught all the time, but if someone uses it every day on a powerful bike, then they can be caught eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'm going to move to a vote now on this. Can I see all those members in favour? Sorry, that application is carried. I'd probably better say something at the end of the third one. So we'll now move on to page 47, with item 9. That's the deferred item from last month's meeting for the...
Have we done these two together, 7 and 8 together? Yeah, we need to do item 8.
Ah. You're right, yes, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Yeah, sorry. This is the proposed conversion of the footpath to a shared footpath cycle track between Watkin Close and Staniforth Road, Darnall. Sorry? And that's on page 31.
Thank you, Chair. Members will notice that we've used the same addendum for this. Some of the questions were relevant, others weren't relevant to this order. I've taken on board what Councillor Lee said on the previous order, and we'll take those points regarding the languages for the notices. I've nothing else to add to that.
Thank you. So apart from being a different part of Sheffield 9, the principle is the same. Have any members got any questions? Any comments? No, that's good. Okay. In that case, we'll take a vote on it. All those members in favour? Can I see a show of hands? Same again.
Yeah.
That motion is carried. Well, sorry, no. Let's see votes against, which I don't think we're going to have. Abstentions. Three abstentions.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. Now we can come on to item 9, also deferred from last month. Shared footpath cycle track between Exeter Drive and Moore Street in Broom Hall, Sheffield 3.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think most of the questions seem to relate to the consultation around this, which I've covered in the addendum. I've nothing else to add to that. So yeah, again, if there are any further questions, I'll try and answer them.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think what we want to know as members is just what has changed in terms of procedures, what lessons have been learned, because clearly we had a position a month ago where colleagues felt they hadn't been properly briefed before it came to this committee, and now clearly reports have been rewritten with these addenda. I'm just hoping that next time either we understand the process in terms of what the role of this committee is, but I understand where members can get briefings, but also make sure that officers put the whole of the report together in the first place and not having to defer it and then put. So has there been any lessons learned from this exercise?
I know that Alan and I asked that question in a chair's briefing. So I don't know if you want to respond, but I'm starting to think that a way forward, given that we're going to have more of these coming down the line, whether it would be better to have a briefing to members, because these aren't the only 3. There's going to be more of these, both for the city centre out into Nether Edge and also into Darnall, and there's another one as well. And this is the result of a tranche of money that's come from central government through the Combined Mayoral Authorities Office, which has then dispersed this money on to Sheffield City Council. So it's not come through the council taxpayers route. It's come through from central government. Yes, Andrew.
Yeah, I think the point I'm making is that clearly last month I was in a privileged position, having been a spokesperson on transport, regeneration and climate, and had been fully briefed on the policy side of the item, not the item that we were addressing here in terms of planning and highways, which is different to the policy. But from a policy point of view, I'd been briefed, and I'd realised that colleagues, from across the table had not had the level of briefing that I had, and that's why I was happy to defer it. I now feel with the addendum we've got more information, but I'm just aware that I have been briefed on given how small some of these items are, we've been briefed on very long schemes, several kilometres long, and each little bit where there's a change of use is going to have to come back as a report. And so I'm aware that some of us have been, because of the briefings we've had in other places, are in a privileged position, and that can't be the way forward. We need to make sure that the colleagues taking the decisions feel as if they've had sufficient information in the report.
Thank you, Chair. The point regarding briefings, as the Chair mentioned, that's certainly an option going forward for larger schemes, for aspects of larger schemes or smaller schemes. There is a point regarding sufficient information being included within the reports, which understand is well appreciated by officers, so as to avoid a situation in which there are reports coming to the committee where sufficient background information is not provided within the reports. But there's also an additional point about decision making in respect of certain powers which are being exercised through this committee or other committees, and it's an ongoing piece of work to look at where it is that a certain power could potentially be exercised by a decision in one committee as opposed to another, that you have one decision in respect of potentially the entirety of the scheme as opposed to it being done piecemeal in the manner referred to.
Thank you for that. Are there any more questions? Diane?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a question. I listened to the questions around the first report and thinking, I don't understand what's going on here because I wasn't here last time. I'm only a sub. But it's become apparent through the comments and the questions that the information isn't there. And I think it relates partly to what Mary said and partly to what Andy said. And what I'd like to ask is, when we have reports about conversions of footpaths to shared tracks in future, would it be possible to have some useful description of where that segment sits in relation to a wider scheme, so that we understand how it contributes towards any bigger aspirations, and also some description about any particular signage that may be prescribed or used, because it would certainly help me to understand more. I understand that this is the part of the decision that we have to make on this particular committee, but it would help me as a member understand what the bigger picture is, and I'm sure it would help members of the public, either with an interest or just looking or just here because they want to contribute to something else. It would help with the transparency and understanding of what is actually taking place. So could we write the report slightly differently, include slightly different information, is what I'm asking, please, Chair.
Do you want to comment, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to comment. Yeah, I can take that into account. We do try and, where possible.
I think what's unusual with these over your regular applications for development, which we're going to come on to with one of the later applications, is that there is a consultation process that will come after this, whereas we're used to being the final arbiters, so to speak, on an application for development. But with highways, it will then go out to the houses nearby, well, and hopefully a bit beyond as well, so that they can make comments about and raise concerns about the changes that are proposed in these developments.
Yeah, Chair.
Tony.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry to labour this. So what you're saying is it's going out to consultation and then it's going to be a decision. So what we're doing today will not be a final decision. Is that correct? Am I right?
I think it is.
I'll let Richard respond.
Thank you, Chair. Part of the statutory procedure with making one of these cycle track conversion orders is that it's required that the council give members of the public the opportunity to potentially object against the making of the order. The principle of making the order, giving the council the authorisation to go ahead and make that order, is what this committee is deciding upon. The statutory procedure necessitates a period of consultation with the public. If the public raise objections against the order, the matter of whether or not the order should proceed to confirmation, which is what would bring it into effect, will return to this committee, and the committee will then have the opportunity to look at the objections that have been raised and decide whether or not the order should be referred to the Secretary of State for confirmation. So that there is an element of consultation that happens after the order is made, If there are objections to that order, then the order will return to this committee for a further decision.
Yes, Chair. I'm all in favour of cycle lanes, obviously. I mean, keeping people fit and everything that goes with that. But I just want to be sure that what we're doing here is making sure that the public are safe, but that's pedestrians as well as cyclists. I just want to make sure that it's a safe mode to what we're working to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Brian?
I hesitate to raise this, but I didn't get any consultation on this at any stage. And looking at the dates we've got on here, we've got April 2021. I was elected in May 2021. So the consultation went out before I was elected. Okay. But at no stage since then have I been notified of not this small element of the scheme, but of the whole scheme, of the nether edge to the city centre scheme. Never appeared in my inbox, not once. Until earlier this year, I spotted a small change which was around Summerfield Street. And so I asked the officer to give us a briefing, and he gave us a briefing on the Summerfield Street element. But I still didn't know about the whole scheme. And I find it absolutely mind-blowing that that didn't happen at any stage. So what needs to happen, never mind this particular one, is that highways do need to keep councillors aware of what is happening in their wards. So that is a point of learning. We talked about points of learning. Well, that's one. Right. That's got that off my chest.
I'm going to propose that perhaps in the next 2 or 3 months that transport officers provide a briefing in the normal way to planning committee ahead of a planning meeting, because I'm aware that different people have come on at different times to this committee, and I think it would be helpful. Yeah, if you can just take that away, Abby, thanks. Sorry, Richard, you also wanted to comment.
Sorry, Chair. Just to respond to Councillor Holmshaw on that, we did consult directly with Councillor Holmshaw back in June on this particular scheme, so it's not that we've not consulted on this proposal. I think Councillor Holmshaw was talking about the whole nether edge wedge rather than this scheme, because we did have an exchange of emails with Councillor Holmshaw. Thank you.
Mary?
Just to say, I support what you said, Chair, because the scheme in Darnall starts at Effingham Street and down by the Wicker and goes all the way up to Staniforth Road, and there are all sorts of small bits to that scheme that we probably aren't aware of, and it's important that we do. And this particular scheme, it does take people's amenity away from them, not just the trees, but it takes part of the grass verge away from the houses that are part of just on that particular cycle path. No, footpath, not a cycle path yet.
Point taken. Okay, if there are no further comments. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. I can't remember exactly when, but a few years ago, I'm going to say, a road user prioritisation scheme was introduced. So we went pedestrians first, cyclists second, cars third. Now, clearly, in this case, there's not, well, hopefully there's not going to be any cars on this. But does that kind of prioritisation work on this type of joint usage footpath stroke cycle path? And if so, how is that communicated to users and how is it policed?
Thank you, Chair. This is all the 3 routes that we've discussed today are all segregated routes. I think there's as a cyclist myself, I think there's a common acceptance that pedestrians have priority over cyclists. But whether how you can pass that on to all users, I don't know. But it will be a segregated route that clearly denotes where cyclists should be and where pedestrians ought to be.
if I could just come back briefly. We have a footpath in Loxley called the Tapping Rail, which is quite well known. David Blunkett set it up for people with impaired vision, and it's meant to be no cycling, and it is used by cyclists at the expense of pedestrians who are frequently having to jump out of the way of people hurtling along. So I don't necessarily share your optimism.
Richard, I think you're raising a valid concern, but it's not directly relevant to this, to the application.
Well, it's just
because
general of all the applications. It's how safety has to be a priority, surely. But I mean, I don't want to labour the point. It's just a general concern.
But I think you need to raise that particular concern in another forum, though. I'm not sure that this meeting is one that can deal with it. Diane?
I'm sorry, Chair, just a brief comment. But if we as elected members are asking these questions here because there's a lack of transparency about process and information, and we don't have that knowledge, then members of the community, the electorate, citizens of the City of Sheffield, who will live in some of the areas that are affected, what chance have they got of having this knowledge and how a footpath is going to be changed or how it links up? And I just think, okay, this is part of a legal process, but surely it's about being transparent about what we're doing, putting things into context and about sharing information. Thank you.
Richard, do you have any slides that show the signage that would go onto these cycleways? I mean, I've seen signage on other designated cycle paths, of which there are a number around Sheffield, but I presume there would be signposts at the entrance to the cycleways and the footpaths, and also there would be marking on both the cycleways and the footpaths that show the segregation of the two.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. I don't have any material in front of me now that I could present to the committee that would display that. I think as part of that point regarding providing information as background in respect of particular schemes going forward, or potentially for inclusion within a broader briefing on some of the transport-related considerations that come before this committee in future, that could certainly be included. So members feel as though they have as much information as they need. Beyond that, whether or not that information can be presented to the public, whether or not that's as part of a report, included within the committee agenda or separately through the council's website, is a point, I think, for further exploration.
Thank you. Are there any more comments or questions? Okay, we will move to a vote. Can I see all those in support of this scheme? Yeah, same again. Sorry, no, against? Abstentions?
Yeah, that's carried.
That scheme is application is carried. Thank you all for that, and thank you, Richard and Richard. We now come on to item 10, which is applications under various acts and regulations, and we have two applications to hear today. We have item 10A, which is the planning application 25-02257 full for number 13, the Quadrant, Sheffield, S17 4DB, and that is on page 61 of the agenda. So, coming to Chris, if you'd like to take us through this presentation.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Healy. I'm Team Manager in Development Management for the South area of the city. The application site is on the quadrant shown here on the map. It's a residential area in Totley. The red line shows the site boundary with the current dwelling to the front, which is a 4-bedroom detached bungalow. This is the aerial view of it. There are no external alterations proposed as part of the application. The application is for a change of use of the property from a Class C3 dwelling house to a Class C2 children's home. It would house 3 children with one staff member per child, and that would operate between 7:30 in the morning and 10:30 at night, and then following 10:30 at night, one staff member would stay over. So during the day, between 7:30 and 10:30 at night, there are 3 staff members. Overnight, there is 1 staff member, with 3 children occupants at all times. You'll see here on these images, hopefully, that the property has a forecourt. Just to the right there, which you can't quite see yet, is a garage, which is part of the dwelling. We don't actually show the garage, but the garage is to the right-hand side, just behind that, what is essentially a pier. There is parking provision on the forecourt for 2 vehicles, albeit with manoeuvring, so both can't come out at the same time. And the garage would house 1 vehicle too. The forecourt is currently loose gravel, but would be hard porous surfacing as part of the proposals. There are approximately 24 objections to the application as listed in the agenda report, covering the use, the appearance of the property, impact on neighbours, highway safety as the kind of the main headings. In planning terms, in our assessment, we've advised that the principle of the use is acceptable. It's in a housing area. Housing policy H10 allows for non-C3 housing uses and considers C2 uses as acceptable. It also, we feel, meets the aims of policy H8 in the Unitary Development Plan, which permits new and refurbished housing in the form of supportive accommodation, sheltered accommodation and care homes under certain criteria, including proximity to shopping centres and transport, suitable for people with disabilities, providing reasonable and attractive area of accessible private open space. There's a large garden to the rear in this case, and that they don't involve extensions or incursions into such space. So we feel that this meets that policy requirement. As I said, there are no physical alterations to the building, and originally proposed there was the removal of the front boundary wall, which is this wall here, to allow for greater ease of access for car parking and parking at 90 degrees to the road, straight in and out. We felt that it wasn't necessary in highway safety terms, and would damage the integrity of the street with frontage car parking. Albeit this frontage is quite different to the rest in that the majority tend to be low hedges or open railings in the case of the one directly opposite. So that is no longer part of the proposal, the removal of the wall. Living conditions has been raised by a number of residents. In terms of the future occupants, the living conditions are to a high standard. It's a fairly recently renovated family home, 4-bedroom family home. There is concern about noise being generated from the property. That would principally be from the coming and going of members of staff in vehicles, which would be concentrated in those times I mentioned, between 7:30 and 10:30. And in terms of the timing of those movements, they're unlikely to be any different to that of a family home, so we don't feel that is a significant issue. Nor do we feel that, given the scale of the property, those movements are likely to be significantly different, if at all, from a four-bedroom family dwelling where 2 or 3 members of the family could drive. In terms of noise from the occupants of the household, that can't clearly be predicted or easily measured, and it'd be unreasonable to assume that certain occupants are inherently noisy and behave in such a way. We do feel, however, it's appropriate to consider to limit the number of occupants to 3 children as proposed, although the property is somewhat self-limiting, to maintain the assessed level of impact. In terms of highways impact, as I said, there is car parking for up to 3 vehicles off street. There's been concern raised that the driveway is too short. It is slightly shorter than we would require, but it's been like that for many years and has operated as a family home in that way without difficulty. A larger vehicle will ever so slightly overhang the footway, but given the presence of the grass verge and the low speeds and calm nature of the road, that's not considered to be a threat to pedestrian safety. There is also scope on street immediately outside the property for 2 further vehicles to park alongside the grass verge without straying into areas outside other properties, for example. And in the garage itself, it measures about 4.9 metres on the approved drawings at least, which is large enough to accommodate a small vehicle, but perhaps some of the larger vehicles wouldn't be able to park within it. So overall, Chair, we don't feel that there are any adverse impacts of the proposal. It provides accommodation that is needed in the city. There is a loss of if you like, a family dwelling as a result of that, but it's a very small consideration. And perhaps a couple of final points to note. Within the report, we refer to the potential for this change being lawful in any event. And what I mean by that is, in this case, planning permission has been applied for, and that's the operator's choice. Other operators of a very similar model have chosen to go down a route of a lawful development certificate, which is effectively the applicant saying, we don't think this needs planning permission. And if the council agrees with that, they grant a lawful development certificate. And that has occurred across the city on a number of occasions with very similar models. And that's just worth bearing in mind as a material consideration. Also, just to make clear that there's been concern about the management of the facility, how will people know it's been managed properly, some concern about the individual operators, etc. But again, that shouldn't be a planning consideration. Ofsted exists to, in this case, monitor the facility in accordance with the children's homes regulations. So that shouldn't be a planning consideration. So there's nothing further to add, Chair, in the supplementary report.
Thank you, Chris. We have no speakers for the application. We do have 3 speakers who wish to speak against, and I have Anthony Joyce, Jane Wood and Tony Wood who would wish to speak on this. Each person speaking has up to 5 minutes. Anthony, are you happy to go first, as your name is down here? You're at the top of my list, but you may not want to be. If you'd like to come to this desk here and press the button on the right, it should go red. If you'd like to state your name, and then you can launch into what you need to say about objecting to this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Anthony Joyce. I live at 2 The Quadrant. I've lived there for 27 years. So I think I'm very experienced with this area. Now, this is a very quiet residential area. That goes without saying. It has a very high proportion of elderly people. I'm 70. The couple living at number 11 next door to number 13 are retired. The couple living at number 15 next door, they are here. They are retired. Couples at number 8 and number 10 are retired. Couple at number 6, he's retired. Number 12 is retired. They don't want any hassle like this at that time and this time of life. They've moved here because it's quiet. They live here because it's quiet. So I think that sets the context for the area. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if this planning permission is granted, this is an exclusively residential area. If this is granted, it changes the whole nature of the area. I know of no other property in this area which has C2 planning permission. It's all C3. Now, to carry on, I can't agree with the planning officer's assessment on several respects. First of all, the planning officer says that it is possible there may be a slight increase in vehicular movements. Well, I don't agree with that. There will be an increase in vehicular movements. There will be staff arriving before 7:30, staff leaving after 10:30. That's before we even get into cooks, cleaners, maintenance staff, gardeners, deliveries. So I can't agree with that assessment at all, I'm afraid. The planning officer also says there may be a slight increase in footfall, but no more than a similar-sized family. I can't agree with that. What family has staff arriving before 7:30? What family has staff leaving after 10:30? And again, what family has cooks, gardeners, maintenance staff, cleaners, deliveries during the day? So I can't agree with that assessment either. Right. The planning officer also says that the proposed shift changes, 7:30 a.m. and 10:30 p.m. are not in antisocial hours. Well, as I've already stated, this is a very mainly elderly residential area. A lot of the people don't get up before 7:30. A lot of them retire before 10:30 in the evening. So they would regard it as antisocial hours, movements, which will disturb them. Okay. Now, the officer also states there is room on the quadrant for a vehicle to pass a parked vehicle. I agree with that. But what happens when a large vehicle comes along? It can't turn, not enough room. And most of them don't try to go any further down the quadrant because there are 3 narrow corners on the southeast side, the northeast side and the northwest side. So what they do, they reverse back down the quadrant. And I have seen that happen to date. It happens regularly. They can't turn, they can't carry on, so they reverse back. Now, surely that is a highways safety issue. And this development shouldn't be allowed when it affects highway safety like that. Now, the officer's report also states that the competency of the firm is not to be considered in the planning application. That might be the case, but I think there are some things about this firm that this committee should be concerned with. Firstly, it has made no effort whatsoever to engage with the residents or to allay their fears. None whatsoever. Not met with them, nothing. It didn't put up a notice that there was a planning application. People like myself only found out through word of mouth, and I live just slightly further up the road. The application was put in during holiday time. You know, whether that was a coincidence or not, I don't know. But it affected me because I came back off holiday yesterday and I've had to come straight here off holiday.
You've got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Right, well, two quick things then. The length of the driveway, it's 4.4 metres, not 5. And that is a planning guideline. And the officer quotes planning policy regulation 135, which states that the development should benefit the area. Development is, and it says that it is compliant with that. Well, I don't think it improves the quality of the area at all. And other people agree with me. Sorry, I didn't realise I was running out of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyce. It, each person gets 5 minutes to speak.
Yeah,
in this.
yeah, I just lost track of time.
Some local authorities allow less time. So would Jane would like to come and speak? You'd like to state your name? And then
My
you
name's
can have
Jane
5
Wood.
minutes.
I live on the quadrant. I'm going to speak fast. This application claims to comply with all regulations, but it can be equally argued at every point the opposite to what is declared, and therefore does not comply at all. There are no proven facts to substantiate the statements. It is speculation. The formal objections we made contain more concise information that is provided in this report. I hope the committee will have seen these before a decision is made. This C2 institution is not an acceptable use of the residential property that exists. The location is not suitable for business. It will adversely impact on all households and will significantly outweigh any benefits and will destroy our healthy community. The change of use will not add to the overall quality of the area. It will be the opposite. The property is unsuitable and not safe for children and those with disabilities. It has been proven that highway safety, the huge increase in traffic and vehicle movement, the lack of parking and increased nuisance noise will negatively affect all the neighbours. This is all far greater than a normal C3 use. C2 is not a family home. It is a small-scale operation. It is not a small-scale operation, in no way similar to a family home. It will be a 24/7, 365 days a year, highly functioning business operating for profit in close proximity to bungalows housing vulnerable elderly residents. It will be an institution with very different children passing through, supervised by lots of different care workers. The carers have no authority over the children and will be challenged by behaviour, and neighbours will suffer the consequences. There will be 3 children. There is a higher probability they will all have more behavioural problems than a normal family. There is evidence that antisocial behaviour does increase in the area of children's homes and has. There is no safe highway access and no appropriate off-street parking, and pedestrians, young and old, will be put in danger, and there will be an unacceptable impact on highway safety all around the whole of the quadrant. This will cause additional and added parking problems that will affect daily residents' lives. The road is not suitable. A car will not fit in the garage. The drive is not 5 metres. There is no room for 2 cars on the front. There is no guarantee of 3 staff members only per day. There will be many, many visitors by the very nature of a C2 institution. It is not the same as a C3 in any way or form. It is a business. All the extra vehicle traffic to this fully functioning business is in addition to the traffic we already have. It will be every day of the week from early to late and even during the night, and will prejudice highway and pedestrian safety and is a contradiction to planning policies. Sizes quoted are all wrong. The front entrance width is only 4.27 metres. The report now says it's okay for a car to overhang the pathway. This is a motoring offence. The report says the lack of parking provision does not matter in this application, yet it is a key planning principle. When cars are parked on the road, there is no splay visibility. This will endanger road users. This is now said to be acceptable. Daily movements of traffic to this C2 will be a major increase and nothing like a family of 4. All properties are close to the road, all bedrooms face the road. There are no trees or walls to absorb additional noise any time of the day and night. The report says this will be barely perceptible. This is outrageous, and everything is being done to manipulate this proposal one way only. The applicant is Champion Homes, a newly formed company, have no experience, no track record, no robust and professional business plan, 3 carers working a 15-hour shift, 1 carer then sleeping in
You have 30
overnight,
seconds left.
overnight for 3 children. There's no on-site manager, nothing is clear and verified. There is no working model. The property is unsuitable and unsafe for children. This is the wrong location. There is no room for business and it will detrimentally affect the whole area. How can C2 be approved to an unknown entity? We recommend this application should be refused.
Thank you. And
Got
well
it
in time. Thank you. You clearly practiced. Well done. Tony Wood, would you like to come and put your case? You also have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Most residents are elderly with serious health problems. We have a moral obligation to protect them. They have a right to feel safe in their own homes, on the streets, and should not fear for their well-being. The drawings that have been submitted in support have given incorrect information. The full-width 3-metre-high veranda with steep steps leading to the unkempt garden has been omitted altogether. The central heating boiler and large hot water cylinder at the back of the garage have been removed from the original drawings. This makes the garage look bigger. The garage is only 4 metres long with these in. The width is 2.3 metres. A Fiesta car is 4 metres long. The garage is too small to be used. There will be 4 cars, 3 carers, 1 pool car. With a manager, that will be 5 cars. The front is only 4.67 metres deep and not the statutory 5-metre parking for parking. The entrance to the front is only 4.3 metres wide and not 6 metres as shown on plans and repeated by planning. Page 75, paragraph 5, says it is now 6.57. At paragraph 8, it has increased to 6.75. And 2 cars will now fit on the drive. They won't. The entrance is still only 4.3 metres. 2 cars cannot park on the front. 1 will be over the front door. Manoeuvres to and from the road will be unsafe. No car park in front of the garage as will overhang onto the pavement, which is a traffic violation. The 5-metre rule has now been conveniently disregarded in the official report. The application is based on the comparison of a family of 4. If like for like would be 2 adults and 2 children under 18, probably with 1 car, and the husband cycles to work. It's the same assumption that the officer is making. Hypothetical. The drop curb is 4 metres wide, not 6 metres as incorrectly recorded. Cars will be parked on the road and the visibility displays are not achievable. The exit area from the front of the house is lower than the road by 25 centimetres. That's 10 inch for us old ones. And there is no view of any traffic using the road. Access to the road will be a safety hazard. Class 2 buildings are classified as higher risk buildings. Upstairs windows have Juliet balconies, a safety hazard. The sleeping carer will sleep upstairs after working a 15-hour shift. 2 children will sleep downstairs. They will be able to leave in the night through their window or front door. There is no completion issue for the property by building control. The installed gas boiler did not have a building work complete certificate of installation. Does the house have an electrical installation condition report, gas safety certificate and EPC? Does the leasehold prohibit any change of use? I object to the planning permission being granted. The house is unsuitable to be changed into a fully functioning business and will cause noise, nuisance, traffic affecting highway safety, impact on the quality of life of residents and affect health and well-being. There is inadequate on-site parking and will cause disruption and is not in keeping with the quiet neighbourhood and is a negative change to the use of the property. It will cause unacceptable harm to the local amenity and we will have no future security. Just to finish on a personal note, not only do you have a duty of care for the children, you also have a duty of care for the residents, whose average age around number 13 is 78. The oldest are in their mid-90s. Amongst the many serious ailments, 2 have blood cancer, 1 has throat cancer, and 1 is bedbound, dying with dementia and cancer.
You have 30 seconds.
And I've finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, do you want to respond to the points raised by those people objecting?
I will to a few, Chair, although I think, as one or two other speakers said, officers and the residents do just come to a different conclusion on the impacts in the majority of this case, I think. So I think the couple of things I just wanted to comment on. Well, yes, we have taken the view that the impact or in terms of the movements, the vehicle movements, the comings and goings, whether they be on foot or on vehicle, the noise that might or might not accrue from the use. We have compared that to a 4-bedroom family dwelling, because that's what it is at the moment, and that's what operates at the moment, and any family could occupy that building without the need for planning permission, and therefore it's an appropriate benchmark, but it's also what is prevalent within the area, so it is in essence the character of the area. And yes, we accept that it's a largely or there is a fair proportion of elderly people, retired people live there at the moment, but that's completely outside the realm of a planning authority. It's the way that people choose to occupy the property. It's not something that we have any control over, and it can change overnight for whatever reason. There was a reference to antisocial hours, and you know, we regard sort of 7:30 in the morning as a very common time that people are going to work in vehicles, if that causes a degree of noise. And although, you know, some of the current occupants, not many of them may do that, again, that could change overnight, and there will be people on the road that do that. And at the end of the day, it's 2 movements, 2 vehicle movements. It's not dozens of vehicles arriving for an event or anything. It's 2 vehicles moving, parking up on the road, shutting a door and walking into the house. It's not an inherently noisy activity. Similarly, 10:30 at night, it's not into the area of that we would consider to be antisocial and again, it's 2 vehicles. There was a comment that, you know, large vehicles can't pass when vehicles are parked on the road, but that exists at the moment. There's no change there, Chair. Whether there's 2 vehicles parked on the road or 3 vehicles parked on the road, any kind of marginal increase, the width is still the same, and people can or can't get past whatever size the vehicle is. In terms of no engagement from the applicant, there is no, as we've often have discussed here, there's no requirement for an applicant to engage. We've carried out our publicity in line with our statement of community involvement and code of practice, and obviously we've got 24 objections, so there's a good proportion of people in the area that are aware of it. I think a lot of other comments that were highway related, maybe Mark might want to come in on. But I think I said at the beginning that a vehicle parked end on would be likely, depending on its size, to slightly overhang the footway. Be that as it may, we don't think that's dangerous. The footway allows for, and the driveway itself allows for people to to slightly deviate around it without any significant problem. And that occur, if anyone looks on Google Street View, you can see that occurring over the years at this site and others up and down the road. So it's not a problem that's unique to this proposal, Chair. So, sorry, a couple of things I did want to mention. There was a comment towards the end there around matters of building regulations, approval, child safety in terms of things like the Juliet balconies and whatever. That's not a matter for us to determine. That's a matter for the for building regulations if that is an issue, but also for the regulatory body, Ofsted through the Children's Home Act. And similarly, if there's anything in the lease that prevents anything other than a household use, then that doesn't prevent planning permission being granted, Chair. That would be something that the operator would have to resolve outside of planning. It's a separate law matter. So I don't know if Mark wants to comment at all on any of the highways aspects.
Do you want to come in on that, Mark?
Not really, Chair. I think Chris has covered everything. I think councillors will make their own minds up. I think everything's been covered.
Not at this time, no. Yeah, but you've had your opportunity to speak. Members, if they feel it's important, can pick up on them. I'm going to ask Mark, you had your hand up first. Then I've got Tony, then Andy, and then Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the officer, from your experience of similar developments such as this, can it be expected that this is a long-term home for the children for years, or does there tend to be a short stay effect, a turnover effect, long-term home or short-term turnover? Thank you.
Chair, I have to say I've got no real experience or knowledge of that. We've dealt with many such applications across the city, but beyond granting planning permission, we rarely have any involvement.
I'm sorry, I promoted you, Tony. You are actually fourth in the list. Yeah, so I'm going to Andrew next.
Thank you, Chair. Boundary treatment. I mean, the current wall does look ugly to my eyes. You know my views on brutalism in general. Surely if the developer was suggesting a different treatment, should we not have pursued that, given that most of the other frontages are low privet hedges? Could this not have been an opportunity to reintroduce a privet hedge and get some commonality between this, the front of this property and the front of other properties on the quadrant?
Chair, the proposal was to remove any form of boundary treatment entirely, and that was our concern, that we would end up with effectively a sea of cars on the frontage, which we didn't feel was appropriate in terms of the residential character of the area. So it was at our request that was retained as a boundary feature. Yes, it's quite stark, and it isn't vegetated in any way. But no, it was just a question of not resulting in an open frontage. So it was our preference for it to stay as it was.
So I'm aware of that, Chair. So was it not an option that we could have conditioned replacing the wall with a low hedge? Because that would have improved the image of the property.
It's something that we could possibly have pursued with them, but in this instance we felt that the wall itself is already present, it's already there, and it would be better to retain it than remove it, and that was as far as I think we went with that.
Okay, can I just go back to this issue about this balance between a provider of care needing to move to put in an application for C2 versus then putting in a lawful development certificate development. I mean, what is the balance, you know, across the city of when do they put in C2 planning applications and when do they apply for the certificate, and how does that vary with other authorities? Because this is not the first of these cases that we've heard over recent years, and it seems to me we've now got case law that a lawful certificate, lawful development certificate is an equally effective way of making this change.
Chair, I've no idea about other authorities, and it's a perception rather than any hard data, but I think the majority of operators do apply for planning permission, with maybe 25% or so following the lawful development certificate route, and that's possibly because they're very rarely identical. There's always often a slight change in the model. It can depend on kind of frequency of shift changes, for example. So if one home is operating with much more frequent shift changes, then they may feel they don't want to be bound by a local development certificate which relies on another model. I don't know. It's an operator choice.
Yeah, I understand, but also having looked at this one and previous ones, the number of 3 children comes up regularly. So clearly, if a proposed home had 5 looked after children, I think what planning officers are suggesting in those cases is that it would often be a change of use because of the number of staff involved. And one of the reasons why there's a choice is because we're only talking about 3 looked after children. Is that the case? I
think that's probably fair, yeah.
Brian.
Sorry, you caught me off guard there. Sorry, Mike. Yeah, so actually, I suppose in a way, I'm actually following on from what Andrew said in a way. So my question is, and it was raised by people who were speaking, is to do with the garage. So what are the plans that the developers have for the garage? In my eye, when I was on site visit yesterday, it's pretty small. I can't see that holding any kind of modern car. So are they planning to use it as storage? And is there any potential there for it being developed into a further room or not? And I ask that because we'd be extending the number of children potentially in the house, if that was the case.
Chair, there's a condition recommended which limits the number of children to 3, so the tail end of that wouldn't occur. In terms of the garage, it scales at 4.9 metres as an empty space on the approved drawings from 2010. As I'm saying, Chair, on the approved drawings in 2010, it scales at 4.9. That would be big enough to accommodate a smaller vehicle. We accept it's a smaller size garage, as are a number along the street and that property had previously. But equally, I think everyone's familiar with situations where garages exist and people don't use them for parking vehicles, and it's quite difficult, it's impossible to force people to park a vehicle within it. So the way that we approach that is that we consider it's possible that a vehicle could park in there, and that could be part of the parking provision. If it doesn't, then it parks on street, then the street parking situation isn't so intense, and the increase and the number of vehicles being used at the site isn't so significant that would result in a highway safety problem. It might mean people parking 2 or 3 doors away, but it wouldn't mean and a slight inconvenience either for the user or potentially for someone who whose house they park outside, but it isn't a highway safety problem, and that would be our view on it.
Sorry, you're coming back, Brian.
Yes, please. So there's no indicative use of the garage. That was one of my other questions.
The suggestion is it would be used for parking, Chair, but I suppose what I'm saying is we can't force them to do that, and they may decide to park on the street instead.
And is there any prohibition to them parking on the street as opposed to parking within the grounds?
No, Chair.
Thank you. We come on then to Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose a couple of questions, but the first one's been relatively answered because on the C2, C3, which Andrew had mentioned and also Brian. But the other question I wanted to ask was, I was on there yesterday with the site visit and it was pretty quiet on there, I must admit, yesterday. But is the road 750 metres wide there? In which case, cars should be able to park on the road opposite one another and allow for an emergency vehicle to go up there. It looked to me as though it was, but I just wanted to clarify that point, please.
Chair, I think Councillor Downey said 750 metres. I don't think he meant that. 7.5 metres. Mark, I wonder if Mark can answer that question, please.
Through the Chair, I thought it looked slightly narrower than that, but we're talking about cars parking on street, which happens now. And there's no material change really. The width of the road is what it is. Cars park on street now.
It's 5.64 metres wide.
Yeah, which is wide enough for two cars to pass if there's not another car parked, but that's the case in many residential areas.
I've got Diane next.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's also another question about possible nuisance from vehicles and just a fact check. In the report, it says that the aperture for cars to come in and out is wide enough and safe enough, but there were assertions made by objectors that it's not actually as wide as that and cars wouldn't be able to get in and manoeuvre safely and be able to see, round the obstruction that the wall provides. I'm just wanting to know what we believe to be the case.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a typing error in the report where on one hand it refers to 6.57 and the other refers to 6.75. And actually, yeah, that would be scaling from the drawing. And in practice, I noticed when we were there yesterday, it appears slightly narrower than that. But for those members that were there yesterday, I haven't got a very good shot of it there. It is a sufficiently wide access to serve as a vehicle entrance and exit point. At that width, or the width that you can see there, Chair, it's perfectly adequate for vehicles to manoeuvre in and out of. Members who were there yesterday will have noted that there was a vehicle parked at an angle which had clearly manoeuvred into that space. And it's perfectly usable. It's operated in that manner for a minimum of sort of probably 10 years since between kind of 5 and 10 years since the wall was erected, without any great difficulty. So it's a perfectly adequate, usable driveway, Chair, in terms of its width.
Is that okay, Diane? Richard, you have a question.
Yeah, quick one, thank you, Chair. Very simply, for clarification, if this application is approved and we move from C3 to C2, does that in effect reduce the housing stock of Sheffield by 1?
Yes, as an open market family house, yes. That's the simplest way of answering that, yeah.
I have a couple of questions myself which pick up on the residents who are objecting their concerns. One, it was drawn to our attention that there are a lot of elderly residents living nearby. I mean, we know it's not a retirement village as such, but there do happen to be a lot of elderly residents, and there are quite a few of them who have serious medical conditions. And I'd like to know if that's a material consideration that we should take account of when coming to a decision on this.
I don't think it reasonably can be, Chair, in a situation where the property is in amongst open market housing, as you suggested there. If it was adjacent to a retirement village, I'm not saying this proposal, because I don't feel that this proposal is harmful, but if it was a given proposal that might be having an impact on a particular group of residents that are in some way vulnerable, then yes, that might be a material consideration. But I think given the nature of this proposal and the nature of the area being open market housing, then I don't think it's reasonable to make that connection.
My other question was, I mean, again, I think at least one objector raised concerns that there might be issues resulting from this development going ahead that might lead to, I suppose, troublesome incidents that impact on the neighbours, and what measures are, or what steps can be put in place to safeguard against that.
Within any planning permission, nothing, Chair. It's a matter for the management of the facility and for the relevant body that oversees that management. In this case, I believe that's Ofsted.
Thank you. Yep, we can go to comments, and Mark would like to make a comment.
I was pleased to see on the site visit that 2 cars were comfortably parked outside the house on the road in the same way as the neighbours' cars. There was no difference. The garage could have a small pool table in it if it's not suitable for a car, but mainly communities can't throw their young people on the scrap heap. It's much better to have children like this in small groups of 3 rather than in big old-fashioned homes with 20 kids in them. Here, they would grow up in a good area, surrounded by decent people who can influence them by example. I think that I will endorse this proposal.
Thank you, Mark. Glynis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I work with a youth club where we have loads of children, albeit some of these are young people with disabilities and learning disabilities. But quite a few of them live in accommodations like this, where they share the house and they enjoy the freedom of having almost a normal life. They do have carers that help them, but they're not a great nuisance to anybody. And I just think, without knowing what children are going to be in there, it's very difficult to say whether they're going to cause problems. But people do need to be able to have an independent life. They need to get away from home, even though they can't manage completely on their own. And we don't know what children are going in there. They could be school age, it could be young children, in which case they need a community to help them grow. I know it's a lot of older people round about, but it could easily have been a family with 3 children moving in there, which would have had, by the time they got to teenagers, far more than 3 cars. So I think I will be voting for this.
Thank you, Glynis. Andrew?
Yes, Chair, I shall be supporting the officer's recommendation. It could easily be a family with 4 children. The reality is it's a family home. When we saw it yesterday, clearly the road is narrow. We accept that. Lots of family homes across Sheffield are in narrow circumstances. You've heard my views about the boundary wall. I think it's ugly, but that's personal view. Accept the officer's position that removing the wall and destroying the glass verge makes it worse in terms of the damage to the street scene. I still wish things could be done to soften the appearance, but it comes down to the fundamental position about looked after children, and we took a decision back in 2000 that the large homes were not a good way of bringing up children. We took that decision. That immediately meant that instead of having 6 large homes, you need 40 to 50 smaller homes, and that's a decision we've taken the policy. So it's the individual case, and the individual case is on planning matters, and we're here to make a decision on planning ground. And is it any different from a family home with 3 or 4 teenagers? Then in my view it remains none. And I wish we could move to a situation where we can have lawful development certificates, because I think we are giving residents false hope by going through this planning process. I think we've taken a policy position that our looked after children should be in small family size groups of no more than 3 across Sheffield, in residential areas across Sheffield, and I think that should be the policy we should support, and we should support you support providers to go through the lawful development certificate when it's 3 or fewer children. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Tony?
Yes, thank you. Lots of children in this city. I've been fortunate to have loving families around them. There are some unfortunate children, like we're going to be talking about here, who need that family support, who need that love and attention that they're probably not getting. And so, in view of the fact that we are short of places like this where children go, and in fact the institutions that we've been talking about are not really the best places for young children to go, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I've heard what the other members have said. I've heard what the local residents have said. I understand their fears. I am minded to support the application, but I have kind of a question. Sorry, Chair. Is there any scope for a temporary approval to see how it goes? So that hopefully residents' fears will be allayed. The company in question will prove they are more than capable of doing what they're meant to doing. Because you're absolutely right. There needs, it's been proven time and time again for the youngsters, this form of accommodation works so much better than the old-fashioned institutes. So I'm just asking the question, is there any scope for that? And if I've got it completely wrong, please tell me.
Chair, I think for a use like this, bear in mind the sensitivity of the use for the people involved as well, and the amount of commitment that a business would have to put into establishing such a facility, and then uncertainty about where that period would come to an end. I'm not sure that would be at all reasonable, and I think it's a question of having to determine whether it is or it isn't acceptable in a case like this.
Okay, I'm going to put it to a vote. Can I see all those members in favour of the proposal? That's unanimous, yeah. So you can put your hands down now. Is there anyone against? And are there any abstentions? No. So that application is carried. And Would members like a comfort break? Okay. Can we come back at 3:45? Thank you. We need to rattle through these last two items of business. They are important. It's the Section 73 application for 25/01340 full in relation to 39 Charles Street, Sheffield, S1 2HU. Many of you will know the site because it's diagonally opposite Howden House. It's on page 79 of the agenda, and Sarah is here to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission was previously granted in November 2022 for a 6-storey mixed-use development comprising commercial accommodation at ground floor and office accommodation at upper floors on the site of 39 Charles Street. The application before us today is an application under Section 73 to vary the conditions attached to the original approval. A Section 73 application can only consider the changes proposed by varying the conditions, and it does not reconsider the entire principle of the development. The conditions proposed to be changed through this application are Condition 2, which relates to the approved drawings, and I'll provide more detail of that as we go through the presentation. Condition 20, which relates to cycle storage, and the condition is proposed to be changed to reflect the changes to the updated plans through Condition 2. There's also changes proposed to Condition 4, which relates to carbon net zero, and that is essentially to allow an alternative assessment framework to be used to assess the carbon net zero. And it's also proposed to change Conditions 3, 4, 11, 12 and 13 to allow for a phased approach to development. This slide shows the red line boundary of the application site. It forms part of an urban block with Charles Street to the south, Norfolk Street to the east. The site is located within the city centre conservation area. The nearest listed building is to the northwest of the site within the same perimeter block, and that's Prudential House. And the buildings either side are considered to be non-designated heritage assets. This is an aerial view of the site. This is a view of the site taken from Union Street, taken from Howden House. You can see the existing building there, which is a 3-storey building, which is proposed to be demolished to make way for the new development. To the left of that building, you can make out Verona House, which, as mentioned previously, is a non-designated heritage asset. And that building comprises commercial accommodation at ground floor with residential accommodation above. This image is taken from Norfolk Street. To the right of the application site, you can make out St Paul's Chambers, which again is commercial accommodation at ground floor with residential accommodation above. This is a view taken from within the perimeter block, taken from the internal courtyard serving the residential accommodation at St Paul's Chambers. The view is taken looking towards the application site, which is just beyond the brick wall, which you can make out is painted with a white square at the top, so that kind of forms the boundary of the application site. The tall white building to the right-hand side of the image with the angled wall is the Prudential building, which is the listed building, and that comprises residential accommodation above ground level. This is a view taken from the area to the rear of the application site, within the application site boundary. The pitched roof that you can make out to the right-hand side of the screen is outside of the application site boundary, and the red brick building that you can see to the right-hand side of the screen is the rear elevation of Verona House. All the windows within the rear elevation of that building serve residential accommodation. This is a view taken from close to the site boundary, so the left-hand side of the screen, the brick wall there, is the site boundary, and it's looking up towards the courtyard area of St Paul's Chambers and towards the Prudential House building. This is taken from a similar viewpoint, again looking up into the courtyard area serving St Paul's Chambers, with the Prudential House building on the left and St Paul's Chambers building on the right. And again, all those windows that you can see there serve residential accommodation. This slide represents a proposed phasing plan which is to be approved as part of this application, as part of the proposed Section 73 changes. Essentially, it's proposed to have a phase 1 demolition, which is the area indicated in the pink hashed area. So it's proposed to demolish a small section of the building to the rear of the site, which isn't visible from the frontage, before moving on to the phase 2 development, which is demolition of the rest of the buildings and construction of the new building. I'll just skip back to that. And as part of that phasing plan, as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, a number of the conditions are proposed to be reworded to allow for that phasing and to allow phase trigger points to allow for that first phase of demolition. So I'll move on to the floor plans now, and I'll point out the main changes that are proposed to the accommodation as part of this Section 73 application. So this is the ground floor plan. The original plans had a basement, and it's now proposed to remove that basement. And as a consequence of that, the ground floor layout has changed. The main changes are that there's a smaller retail unit proposed, and that's the orange area to the left-hand side of that floor plan. That's the commercial accommodation, and that's reduced in scale. The middle section, which is in the yellowish colour, is the entrance to the office accommodation, and that's in a similar position to previously. But as a result of the loss of the basement, a number of the facilities provided in that basement area have now moved up to ground floor. So essentially that includes the cycle store and the bin store, which are shown on the right-hand side of that building. As a consequence of those changes, there's also been some slight changes to the doors at ground floor level as well. This is a second floor plan, so moving up the building at second floor, which is similar to the third and fourth floors proposed. The key changes on this floor plan are to the area to the left of the stair core, so to the rear of that plan, the area in purple is the stair core, and to the left-hand side of that stair core, you can make out a recessed element, and it's got a ventilation louver on it as well. The depth of that recessed area has been reduced by approximately 0.7 metres, so that's the key change on that elevation. So it's been brought further forward towards those residential properties in Verona House. There's also minor changes to include ventilation louvers within that recessed area where there were none before, and it's also proposed to remove glazing to the areas serving the toilets, which was on the northern elevation. This is the proposed fifth floor, and the key changes here are the alterations to move the glazing towards the front of the building in slightly further forward to be in line with the main facade of the building, whereas previously the fifth floor was recessed slightly by approximately 300 millimetres. In addition to that, there's a proposed terrace to the front corner of the building adjacent to Verona House. So that's the angled terrace there towards the left-hand side of the screen. There was already a terrace proposed, and that's shown on the right-hand side of the screen, and that's to be retained as well. Just moving on to the elevations and pointing out the main changes to the elevations. It's worth noting that there's been an overall reduction in the scale of the building, although very slight. That reduction amounts to approximately 0.625 metres in overall height. There's also been a number of ventilation louvers added to the glazing, and as I mentioned before, the small windows serving the toilet areas, which previously went down the side of that green wall that you can see there, have been removed. There's also been a slight alteration to the position of the plant screen, but overall the size is largely the same. So moving on to the elevation fronting Norfolk Street, again, minor changes visually, a reduction in height of 0.625 metres, some alterations to the glazing to include ventilation louvers, and some minor changes to doorways there. This is the elevation fronting Charles Street. The key changes that you can see there are the addition of some glazed balustrading to the balcony area proposed adjacent to Verona House. And moving on to the rear elevation, the key changes there are, again, the introduction of that balcony. You can see the glazed balustrade there, and the introduction of louvres above and to the side of the green wall. So this is a CGI of the building, looking down Charles Street. So overall, the changes are considered to be relatively minor. The main changes for consideration as a result of the changes to the conditions relate to design and heritage implications and amenity considerations. In terms of the design and the heritage implications, the changes which are visible from the external public-facing elevations, notably the slight reduction in height, the repositioning of the fifth floor glazing, minor changes to glazing, doors and louvres, and the introduction of that fifth floor balcony are all considered to be minor and to not cause any additional issues in terms of any additional harm to the heritage assets in comparison to the assessment that was carried out previously. In terms of amenity, again, the changes are minor. The reduction in height offsets the slight reduction in the depth of that recess that I indicated previously adjacent to Verona House. An addendum has been submitted to the previous daylight and sunlight report, and it states that there's no additional impact over and above the previous scheme, and officers agree with that assessment. In terms of the fifth floor balcony, obviously that's an additional feature, but the scale of it, I'll just skip back to that. The scale of it is such that it's not considered that it will be heavily used, so the width is approximately 1.2 metres. So in terms of its usability, it won't be able to accommodate a significant amount of people, and it won't be able to accommodate people to gather out there. It will mainly just be used to get a bit of fresh air and then come back in. And its position is such that it offers views over and over the rooftop of Verona House. And the separation distances to the nearest windows are such that it's not considered to cause an unacceptable loss of privacy to neighbouring residential properties. The changes to the other conditions are clearly set out in the officer report and are considered to be acceptable, and they don't deviate from the original intentions of those conditions. The application is at committee today because there's been a high number of objections, so there's been a total of 40 neighbouring representations received, objections from local councillors, Hallamshire Historic Buildings and the Residents Association Changing Sheffield. All those objections are set out clearly in the officer report, and I would just like to draw members' attention to the supplementary report, some minor changes to conditions and clarifications there. So the first one is that we're proposing to put an additional condition on the proposal, and that's to make sure that any demolition carried out within the phase 1 works are not stored externally on the site. So that condition just makes sure that any demolition materials are removed from that section of the site, and either stored internally within the building or removed from the site. There's also an amendment to condition 28, and that's just to tweak the condition numbers which were in error in that condition. And then a couple of clarifications in the report. So the report suggested that there was a change to the setback of the lower floors adjacent to St Paul's Chambers, but actually there is no change in relation to the position of the lower floors in relation to St Paul's Chambers, only a slight reduction, a slight change to the fifth floor where the glazing is brought forward slightly. And the report also states that there are windows to the north elevation serving the toilet area, but they have been removed by the reinstatement of the green wall to that elevation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. We have 3 speakers today, 2 of them speaking against the application and 1 speaker speaking for it. I'm going to take the 2 speakers objecting to this application first. I'm going to ask Stuart Bywater to come to the microphone. Mr. Bywater, you have 5 minutes if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Right, if I press the right button, yeah. Okay. Yeah, my name's, as the Chair said, my name is Stuart Bywater. I'm a resident property owner and the manager of St Paul's Chambers, as well as the manager of Barona House. In this capacity, I've had regular communication with the leaseholders and residents of both these buildings, as well as our neighbours in Waterhouse, Prudential Building, as it's sometimes known. If councillors were unaware, both St Paul's and Barona are listed as buildings of historical interest, and the Waterhouse is Grade 2 listed. All are located within the conservation area. As I say, I've had and still do have a great deal of communication with the residents of these buildings, and therefore I'm here today at their invitation to speak on their behalf, as well as my own. I will tell you from the onset that the consensus from the majority of the owners and residents has been total horror, shock, anxiety, even fear, with the prospect of this ridiculous office block being allowed and built. You as councillors obviously are fully aware of the opposition, given the large number of comments that have been registered objecting to this planning development at every stage. Opposition I had not only from the neighbouring residents, but Sheffield people from all over the city, as well as bodies such as Historic England and Hampshire Historic Buildings. I will also say there is also a great deal of anger and growing resentment towards Sheffield City Council because of the way the residents see, rightly or wrongly, the way the council seem to have totally run roughshod over the genuine concerns about the size and proximity of this office block. Even after these fears and anxieties were supported by first the councillors in the first planning application and fully backed up by the planning inspectorate when they reviewed the first building, the 7-storey building. I'm going to quote the planning inspectorate at this point, who concluded about this building: it would fail to preserve or enhance the character of the appearance of the conservation area, fail to complement the scale, form and architectural style of surrounding NDHAs, and would be harmful to the living conditions of existing neighbouring occupiers with regards to daylight, sunlight and outlook. I am aware this is the inspectorate's conclusion regarding the 7-storey building, but these findings were nonetheless incredibly damning, and they obviously have to be relevant today, given the fact we are talking about a 6-storey building as opposed to a 7-storey building. I would also add that, let's be honest, if the planning inspectorate report for this building had been published and you'd have seen it as councillors 14 days, I say again 14 days earlier, we wouldn't be here today. So anyway, we are. So let's talk about green walls. It is reasonably obvious to conclude that the introduction of a green wall into this version of the scheme was the developer's olive branch to get the deal done. Easy to conclude because the first version of the planning amendments, which was sent out recently, had removed the green wall from the rear, moving it from the rear of the building overlooking Barona, St Paul's and Waterhouse to the front, so therefore giving all the residents the nagging feeling that the intention to lessen the impact of a 25-metre stark brick wall was, let's say, very short-lived by the developer. However, with the intervention of the planning officer, no doubt, the green wall is now back in all its glory, but given the obvious reticence of the developer, and even after the conversations with the planning officer, there is still a massive concern from the residents over the long-term maintenance, upkeep and appearance of this wall going forward. Let's be honest here, for those residents in Barona set to lose 90% of their daylight, there's little consolation if a 25-metre wall, 10 metres away from the balcony window, has plants on it or not. But I am sure we can agree a living green wall will look a damn sight better than a dead brown one. At this point, can I draw your attention to the planning inspectorate's comment on the introduction of a living wall and its impact? I quote, "While softening the appearance from this aspect, the living wall would not address the proximity, mass or height. The outlook from these windows would be adversely affected by the greater sense of enclosure with the existing occupants feeling hemmed in by the proposed development. From a resident's point of view...
Can I just say you've got 30 seconds left?
Okay. From a resident point of view, okay, I'll move on quickly then. I would also like to point out about the balcony terrace that has appeared on the corner of Norfolk Street. One of the major bugbears of the development was its extruding nature, and it's a very fact why inwardly looking windows were removed. I note the developers and planning officer's comments on this terrace. They say, given this is only 1 metre wide, it's unlikely to be used. Surely, if it's unlikely to be used, why build it? And just a quick one on we've just picked up about the vents. Relating to the vents, I see you have a number of conditions regarding emissions and noise and smells from cooking devices, etc. Noticing the existing sound and smell for Brown's restaurant, we don't want any more of these, being in mind the reduction in nature, sorry, I can't read that, airflow, which is kind of would cause. The fact that noise is subject to regulations means that there will be noise and emissions. This is on the plans moved from the side street to the street side to the side that we live in. We don't feel this is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bywater. I have to say that a number of your objections related to the previous planning applications and weren't specific to these changes. So I would ask Anne Walton to speak. But it's what's relevant to this application that we have in front of us, which is a Section 73 application. The principle of development has already been agreed.
I'd like to council, you'd like to see what the residents thought who were living there.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Walton, owner and resident. It's clear that this building has been controversial, presented challenges to meet the conflicting needs. I think that the reason why we're going backwards is because these small changes that we're talking about today are so important considering what we're facing. And if I can just put it into context for those of you who haven't visited, if you sort of take where Councillor Glynis and Councillor Mark are, and look up from there, 3 times, the wall that we're facing is 3 times the height of this room. So we go there, that's my front door, then 3 times the height of this room. And that's why these things are so important and why we have to go backwards and forwards. And we have to refer and have help in this from the Planning Inspectorate and from that appeal that was made after the decision for the 7th storey block in 2021, because that appeal was not heard here, and it was not part of the 6th storey scheme when it came to committee in November 2022, only just before. So it's not in your pack today, but obviously what they said about the 7th storey applies to the 6th storey. And that's why it's so important that when we're thinking about those green walls that have been added, the purpose is to go some way to ameliorating that impact of the overbearing and oppressive effect of the brick wall. Their words, not mine. It is relevant to that scheme, and I think you've got to note that the greening is only on part of that wall and quite close to us. So it's not for the whole of the wall. We will still have a very high brick wall presence as we look out. It will close that space and there won't be the right airflow that there was before. It begs the question, that green wall was at the first submission in May. Because of the difficulty of installing and maintenance, it was then brought back to the rear inner elevation by further amendments in June this year. And it begs the question, did the developer solve all the problems in that intervening few weeks, which were not solved in the preceding 3 years? So is that wall going to work? I'd ask you please to consider carefully the wording of condition 31 about the nature and maintenance of the green wall and how compliance may be ensured for the life of the building. Now, my mother's 94, and if genetics do their work, I'll be looking at those walls for the next 25 years. Concerning the balconies, there's so much being claimed about the benefits of sunlight and outdoor space, and balconies are a good way of opening that office space for that bit of fresh air, for the people working there from 9 to 5. However, for residents, this benefit has been taken away and we'll be living in shade for 24/7. And yet you've put in something that's going to further reduce our amenity by putting the possibility of intrusion into our windows and space. I'm just cutting out the bits that you don't want to hear. Previously, the developers have claimed that residents use only the outside space in summer. That's without foundation. Spring, autumn and winter sun are, if anything, more important than summer to give that mental boost and reduce fuel bills in the darker seasons. Right, that's last one. The Inspectorate has a lot to say in their appeal document about the design and purpose of the development, and it makes interesting reading, and it's covered by Hallamshire Historic Buildings and others. I'd only comment to say I agree with their appraisals and ask you to look at the appeal document in reference to what they've also said for the changes in the recent application. In a few moments, we're going to hear the developer's representation. That's prepared by professional public relations experts. I speak as a member of the public, lifelong resident of Sheffield, family history going back generations. And to be honest, this is the only place I have to say this, but I felt let down when I came to this committee in November 2022, so soon before that appeal was published, without councillors or public having notice of the date. It did not seem to me to be democratic. So thank you for hearing me today. And I do say, please look at that planning inspectorate appeal result as you make your deliberations on these minor but very important considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Walton. Charles Dunn, would you like to come to the microphone? You also have 5 minutes. I believe you're the agent for this application.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. My name's Charles Dunn from Urbana, the agent for the application. To reiterate, to start, I think it's important to say again, the application follows the existing permission for the demolition of the existing buildings and replacement with a 6-storey building for office use. As you've heard, it's a Section 73 application that seeks approval only for minor changes, which include removal of the basement, alterations to the ground floor layout to include elements that were previously proposed to be located in the basement, that new terrace on the 5th floor that's been discussed, and crucially, a reduction in the height of the building that is already approved. The green walls are to remain substantially in the same position as previously consented, facing the internal courtyards at the rear. The amendments proposed are largely required to make the scheme deliverable and viable, and the design team has worked very hard to retain the project specification and sustainability intent, whilst also rationalising the design to a scheme that can now be delivered. As out in the officer's report, this application relates again only to the modest amendments proposed, which are agreed to not alter the fundamental nature, scale or design quality and intent of the development. The principle of office use at this site has already been established through the existing permission. Officers are satisfied that the revised proposals continue to comply with adopted planning policy and make a positive contribution to the city's economic growth objectives. There are no technical objections from consultees, and the application raises no additional impacts that would justify refusal. In relation to the existing permission, concerns, again, as you've clearly heard today were raised previously regarding potential loss of light to properties out the rear. The approved daylight and sunlight assessment at the time confirmed that any impact would be acceptable within the context of the city centre development environment, and that the courtyard amenity space would continue to benefit from good levels of sunlight during the months when it is most attractive and likely to be used. The updated addendum that's been submitted with this application confirms that this position remains unchanged. In addition, the approved scheme has since been reduced in height, as you've heard again, which will only serve to further improve the relationship with neighbouring properties. It's also important to summarise the plethora of other public benefits that the delivery of the scheme will bring with it, which include provision of the first privately funded net zero office building in Sheffield, setting a benchmark for future development, provision of Grade A office space to attract and retain our employers, regeneration of a prominent brownfield site with a modern and attractive building in place of the existing dilapidated structures, support for Sheffield's climate and sustainability commitments through low-carbon construction and operation, creation of significant employment opportunities, both during construction and in the long-term occupation of the building, enhancement of the conservation area through high-quality contextual architecture that improves and respects nearby heritage assets, improved outlook compared with the existing and dilapidated building, and provision of green walls requiring low maintenance and adding to the biodiversity of the scheme. Overall, as you've heard, officers have concluded that the minor amendments proposed will not be detrimental to the appearance or character of the conservation area or any nearby listed building or non-designated heritage assets, nor will there be any adverse additional impact over and above the previous approval in terms of overshadowing or overbearing for nearby occupiers, and indeed, due to the height reduction, this will be reduced. In conclusion, the application before you proposes a development of exceptional design quality that sets a new precedent for beautiful and sustainable architecture in this very prominent location in the heart of the city, which will positively impact on the wider area and benefit the economic growth of Sheffield. I therefore strongly urge you to support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Sarah, do you want to respond to any of the earlier comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of quick comments to make. So, a number of the points made obviously related to the sort of principle of the development, and it's just a reminder that we're not reassessing the principle of development. This is a Section 73 application, and we're focusing just on the changes proposed as part of this application. In relation to the green wall, we've had a look at that, and we've consulted our landscape team on that, and essentially it's considered that although it's going to be fairly shady and some of the walls are north facing, that it is possible to select plants that are shade tolerant that will be able to survive and indeed thrive in those conditions. And really it's down to kind of the plants that are selected, the way the green wall is constructed, and the maintenance of those green walls. Condition 31 requires the details to be provided, so we can have a look at that and make sure that the correct plants and system has been selected. And condition 31 also requires any failures to be replaced for the lifetime of the development. And that's all.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got Glynis, then Marianne, and then Brian wishing to speak. So, Glynis, over to you. This is questions, I should say.
This is a question about the venting. I know when we were around visiting yesterday, I noticed there were loads and loads of air conditioning inverters all stuck round the back. They are noisy, and they do get smelly. So where is the venting going? We don't see where the venting is going on this new building. And there are comments about it going out the back rather than out the front or the side. So the noise and the smells will still be coming to the residents. I mean, is that right? I've not seen the plans as such, so I can't say.
Okay, so there's some plant on the roof, so that will so the grey section there that you can see above the roof line, that includes some plant and equipment. But then on the rear elevation, sorry, just skip to the right one, there are some ventilation louvres there. So it's a mixture of kind of those louvres on the back and whatever's in the plant on the rooftop. But there are a number of conditions on the application which control the noise and require details to be submitted of noise for external extraction equipment, which would ensure that it didn't cause an unacceptable impact to residential properties.
Thank you.
Marianne.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the people who've come to speak on this. I mean, I do understand that, you know, the development has already been approved in principle, and we are just here to look at the application for the variation. But I want to ask about the planning inspector report, and, you know, I'm a bit shocked to hear that from, you know, from members of the public, because the timing does seem a bit off with regards to the appeal being heard 2 weeks before the subsequent planning application. And I suppose my question is, I mean, I understand that, you know, that was an appeal with regards to the 7-storey application. The appeal was dismissed, and I've just looked up the inspector's report. Really, we shouldn't be in a position where we're having to do that in the meeting. I just wondered, is there a reason why that wasn't provided to us? Because it seems highly relevant to the location. You know, albeit that this is a different application, it's highly relevant to the location still, and being that we've got this new terrace being proposed and there's further loss of amenity for residents, and in the planning inspector report it acknowledges that there's going to be a loss of amenity. Just wonder what the reasoning is for not providing us with that, because I would have found that really useful to read.
So the officer report does mention that appeal decision in the section relating to the relevant planning history. It refers to that previous application, and it refers to the appeal decision. This application is for changes to an application that already has planning permission, so that we're focusing on that. And so obviously the appeal decision was made after was received after the 6-storey development was granted, but the reason that it's not expanded upon further is because that relates to the 7-storey development, and what we're looking at today is the 6-storey development, which has planning permission, and we're just focusing on the changes to that 6-storey development, which we granted in 2022.
I mean, I understand that. I think I articulated that before, and I do understand that you're saying it's not relevant. I'm just saying I think it would have been useful for us to see the contents of that report for transparency, so that we knew the context.
Okay, as I said, it was mentioned in the officer report, and it is available in the public file to view.
Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I've actually got 3 questions. The first one is following up from what Marianne has just mentioned, which is about the appeal. So as far as I can see, I can't spot it in the report. I would have liked that kind of context so that we can understand where a lot of the residents who have come here today are coming from. So I've got on page 94, it says the appeal was dismissed, but I can't spot actually any context to say, from what I understand, are the reasons behind the inspector coming out with their comments about outlook, about the visibility of the building, and about the heritage context as well. So I may have missed that, but because I've missed it, you know, it's made it not as easy to fully understand what's going off here.
Okay, yeah, I note your comments, and it isn't expanded upon in this report, and that's principally because this is a Section 73 application, because we're looking at what we granted permission for before and what the implications of those changes is, and we've considered the key material considerations in relation to the matters relevant to the changes in the conditions.
Okay. I mean, yes, I can see that, but, you know, a small section saying context would perhaps address some of the cynicism that residents have about the process. So I just think we need to think it that way through in future.
No, okay, and I note your comments, and if it's useful for I can expand upon that appeal decision now briefly. So the appeal was dismissed, and the main findings as part of that appeal, it was dismissed upon heritage impacts, so impacts of the design on the heritage assets, conservation area, and the adjacent non-designated heritage assets, and also on amenity grounds in terms of overshadowing and loss of sunlight to the residential properties surrounding the development. But setting that aside, obviously we've granted this development for 6 stories, and we are looking at the changes proposed through this.
Thank you, Sarah. I've got 2 questions, hopefully perhaps a bit quicker. We can move through them. So the next one is in connection with the green wall. So my experience of green walls is they are not simple affairs. They have to be well looked after, they have to be maintained, but they also have to have some investment as well. So, you know, I think for me, one of the words that's missing from the conditioning is about investment and making sure that the planting scheme is maintained. There are examples in the city where plants struggle, and perhaps in the wrong location. But also, you know, if you don't put money into them and you don't look after them, then they're going to struggle. Broomhill Shops, for example, there's a green wall there that really needs redoing, needs renewing. And Marks and Spencer's down on Ecclesall Road as well. That I've had notes that is actually a dying wall. And I'm not quite sure why, but it would be good to try and find out. So for me, you know, the question is, you know, can we get that kind of investment phrase in there, and can that be agreed by the developer? So that's my second question.
You're proposing an amendment to tighten up that condition then?
I think I am, Mike, actually. Yes, if that's acceptable for the planning officer.
So the later part of the condition says that after the details are agreed, which obviously we'd be seeking to ensure species that would be shade tolerant in that environment. But the condition specifically states that the green and biodiverse walls, vegetated surface shall be implemented and cultivated and maintained in accordance with the approved details, with any failures to be replaced. So in my opinion, the cultivation and maintenance, it requires its ongoing maintenance, and I don't necessarily think that anything over and above that is required.
I think you're probably right, actually. You know, looking over that, I'm content with that. Yeah, thank you. Third question, if possible. Thank you. So there is an additional terrace on the building, which must be there for a reason. So I'm wondering why there's an additional terrace on this building, and why would it be there? Why have we got an additional terrace on the building if it's not going to have a view to be able to overlook the area?
It's a relocation of the terrace. The terrace was originally going to be a lot nearer to the Browns.
I think it's additional. It's an additional as well as an existing one. There is a second terrace that's been put in the building.
I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I don't know why they've proposed it, so I can't answer that, I'm afraid. All I can do is assess what's being proposed.
Thank you.
I'd like to pick up on the daylight issue. I think the first speaker, Mr. Bywater, said there would be a loss of 90% of daylight to residents living in the flats opposite. Do planning officers agree with that assessment?
Again, I think it's just worth referring us back to the fact that this is a Section 73 application, and what we're looking at here is any additional impact of the changes proposed through the conditions, which essentially are a slight reduction in height, but then also a slight pulling forwards of the building in that recessed area next to the stair core. And we've had an addendum to the daylight and sunlight survey which says that there won't be any additional impact on that. So I think it's just worth drawing it back to the fact that this is a section 73 and that's what we should be focusing on as this application.
Okay, can I move to member? So, Richard, there's a question.
Yeah, it's a question, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, just coming back to this additional terrace, just for clarification, if that goes in, then there will be no potential increased overlooking or loss of, onto any other residential property. There'll be no loss of privacy for the existing residents.
So the terrace wraps around the corner of the building. This is perhaps, this drawing is the second floor plan, or doesn't show the terrace on it, but equally the fifth floor plan doesn't show the neighbouring building. So I'll refer to this for information. So if you remember where the terrace is in that corner of the building. So you can see Verona House, the outline of that next to the application site. That's 3 to 4 stories high. So the terrace will have views over the rooftops of that building. And then there is the courtyard area, and the nearest point of the terrace to the windows within the rear of Verona House, which is looking sort of opposite, is approximately 12 metres, which is considered to be an acceptable distance when taken in conjunction with kind of the scale of that terrace, with it only being just over 1 metre wide. And it's used for office. The building is an office building, so it's to be used in association with those offices. So our conclusion is that it won't result in unacceptable overlooking. I suppose it's also worth noting that that is a fairly tight courtyard area anyway, and that there are existing windows within the rear elevation of Verona House, which have similar separation distances to that proposed here.
Okay, yeah, but it's I think one of the underlying issues with this particular application for change of use is it's the creeping effect. That, I mean, we've heard that the application that was approved was contentious, but it's been approved, and we have to live with that. But it's whether this creep is going beyond a boundary of reasonableness, and if this is such a small incidental terrace, as somebody said, why have it at all? Then if you can have, it's there to allow fresh air. I mean, can we, for example, ask for the screens on the terrace to actually be raised so that it can't increase any chances of overlooking? Would that be a reasonable additional condition?
It would be something that we could consider. I would suggest that if members are minded to suggest that, we give consideration to where that screen could be, because particularly to that front elevation, looking onto Charles Street and sort of wrapping around the first part of that corner, that the views from that area would be over the street, and so wouldn't be.
Sorry, I'm not really worried about that particular terrace.
Yeah.
It's the new one at the back.
This is the new one is the one at the corner. We're talking about the one that's the kind of triangular shaped one.
Can we make any comments about the one at the back?
That's already been approved.
That's been approved?
Yeah, and there's no changes proposed to that.
Okay. In that case, I withdraw my comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah, could I ask that you just click through that again, because it made sense of the terrace. When you could see the second floor with the terrace, it actually made sense of it. It's a drawing back away from the other buildings of the new building, and a terrace being inserted. Is it? I'm so, it's all right. Dinah's going to point. Thank you.
So this is the fifth floor plan. So that's the terrace that Dinah's pointing to there. And then if we go back to the layout, so it's just that area there.
It sits above the existing building. Yeah, beyond it, it sits above it. And this is Verona House. This is the road. This is the courtyard.
Thank you. That makes that very clear. And since that terrace sits above the roof of Verona House, there are no skylights or roof terraces on Verona House that it may be overlooking?
That's correct. Sorry, that's correct. Yeah, that's the nearest windows are. There are windows in that rear elevation of Verona House directly adjacent, but because of the height, it wouldn't be looking down into those windows. And then the nearest windows are opposite the other side of the courtyard, and they're about 12 metres away.
Thank you. That makes sense now.
Brian, your hand's gone up again. And then Janet.
I'm afraid. Just following on, I want to clarify absolutely that no residents will be overlooked by this terrace, by this new additional terrace.
Well, I've sort of advised of the separation distances of 12 metres, so obviously there would be some view at a separation distance of 12 metres, and as officers we've assessed that and considered that to be acceptable.
Yeah, if I can ask that, I'll ask that question.
I believe it's slightly a similar distance to those balconies as well.
Yes, I think
so
it would help to like.
Okay, so the separation distances are similar to the balconies as well. Let me see if there's a photograph which might help. So you can see the balconies there. Dinah might point again. Yeah, and the terrace will be in that location there. That's a different building. That's Prudential House and St Paul's Chambers. So that's not Verona House. Yeah, but that's if Dinah could perhaps point to that's within the rear. That's a different view. That's looking at the rear of St Paul's Chambers, which is around there. Yeah, and the balcony is right towards this front corner at Charles Street.
Janet, you have a question?
It's not a question, I'll wait for
Okay, so we'll go to Marianne.
Thank you. Yeah, just for absolute clarification on that point, so we all know, there will be views over residential property, windows and balconies. Is that right? But they will be approximately 12 metres away. Is that?
So the rear corner of the terrace. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. So from that rear corner, Dinah, if you wouldn't mind pointing again, that would be wonderful. So this rear corner, and I'll go back to that, there will be views across that courtyard to the rear elevation. The closest distance from that corner to the rear is approximately 12 metres, and then that distance gets greater the further towards the corner you go, towards those balconies.
So there will be overlooking of residential properties of approximately 12 metres, and that 12 metres, why is that number deemed acceptable? Is that a planning requirement? Where have officers based that acceptability on?
It's just a matter of judgment, really. In a dense city centre location such as this, it's considered that distance is acceptable. There's a similar distance between windows within the rear elevations of buildings at the moment. And again, referring back to the scale of that balcony, which is only 1.2 metres wide, and we're only talking about that small corner area which has those views out in that direction. It's considered that the usability and the number of people on that is such that that relationship would be acceptable in this instance.
I think members have got reservations about that. That's what I'm picking up, and I wonder whether we would consider shortening that side that's in closer proximity to the neighbours.
I think if I've given the distances, obviously, if members do have concerns about that element in particular and that particular relationship with that rear corner, they could consider a screen, a 1.8 metre high screen, to prevent views in that direction in particular.
Would that be acceptable to members as a condition? Can I see a show of hands who would be in favour of that, and then we can work out the detail? Putting a 1.8 metre screen up on the right hand end of that. Go there, yeah.
Are you moving that from the chair?
I will move that from the chair if people are happy with that, and if anyone wants to second it.
Is there a material difference between a balcony overlooking and a window overlooking? If you're looking through a window and you see the massive window, is there any difference if it's a balcony that you're looking for?
Well, you're looking balcony to balcony, and what the screen would do, it would prevent that overlooking, because this building has the height advantage over the neighbouring properties.
Chair, can I just ask that if there was a proposed, is this going to be a potential new condition, just that it's proposed, seconded and voted on, and if members want to just finalise the wording with the co-chairs afterwards in terms of the reasons for it, and just obviously you're talking about that corner, but not necessarily how far along one side it's going to go, so that might be something that officers will need to sort of address, unless a member wants to sort of specify that now. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I've moved it. Is anyone happy to second that? Or do you want to? Thank you, Marianne. Sorry, Marianne.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a comment. I mean, I do think we need to have a conversation about this balcony, because there's some quite odd statements in it about it. It's not going to be heavily used, which does beg the question as to why it's necessary, which makes you think, well, it's obviously because the developer acknowledges the benefits of having more light and air in a building, and that's going to make it more pleasant for people who work in the office, but the knock-on effect of that is the residents' living conditions are going to be detrimentally affected. So it's hard to sort of balance that out. I mean, I do think we need to have a conversation about it. I don't know whether the screening is the right thing personally, but I'm happy to support that if that's, if we think that will be helpful. Or do we need to put that into a form of words?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's members are able to specify what they think will mitigate the perceived amenity impact of the neighbours of the balcony. Obviously, I think the planning officers have suggested 1.8 metres, presumably that's good. So that's a standard sort of screen for balconies such as this. So I think in that respect, members could say they want a 1.8 metre screen, but they will leave the rest of the detail for officers to discuss with co-chairs, because obviously there are maybe other aspects to it that also need to be fine-tuned, but if members may be satisfied that a 1.8 metre screening will mitigate amenity concerns.
Just checking, we can't reject the balcony in isolation, can we? We would have to vote against the whole thing.
You could propose that. If you wanted to reject the whole balcony. I mean, my initial thought was to shorten it across the top so that it didn't extend as far over. But I'm happy for members to come up with their own proposal.
I mean, I'd be happy to propose rejecting the balcony if that's something we can do.
I'll go to Vicky. I see Diane's hand is up, though.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you've got a planning application in front of you, and your choices are to accept it or refuse it, not to, sort of change it. You can refuse it on the basis that you feel that the impacts of the balcony are too great. But bear in mind, you have got the Section 73 consideration, where actually you are limited here to just look at the conditions, and you either grant it with these new conditions, or you decide to essentially that the existing planning permission with existing conditions are acceptable. So it would have to be looking at this application is materially different to the other one, such as an impact of this new application as opposed to the existing one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to suggest something slightly different, because we said screen, but does it need to be a screen? Is not what we're talking about just something to mitigate overlooking on that extreme corner, which could be a screen, or it could be planting, or it could be a bit of public art on that corner or something like that. But just to give officers some leeway to work with the developer to do something to reduce any possibility of impact or reduce the impact or possibility of overlooking at that extreme end. I've just made it more complicated, haven't I? I'm sorry.
I think a screen would be fairly easy to implement, given that they've got a glazed screen around it anyway. We just need the height of part of it increasing and it making sure it was opaque and you couldn't see through it. It's not a particularly big space, so the opportunity for landscaping would perhaps not be particularly great, and obviously that could then potentially be moved as well, whereas if we've got a solid screen that's permanently fixed there, it would last and it would be there and prevent any perceived amenity issues that members have.
Chair, just to remind you that you have got a proposal and a seconded, but I don't think we've had a final show of hands on the extra condition regarding this yet. Thank you, Chair.
Can I see a show of hands on the proposal as it's put for the...
Could you remind us, Chair, because we've had such a lot of discussion since.
Well, myself and Alan, yeah.
Did you get that? Sorry. No. So it's to agree a 1.8 metre screen to the terrace. Is it a certain side or just all of it?
No, it's that.
To the sort of rear corner, exact details to be agreed.
Can I see a show of hands in favour of that proposal, please? Thank you, members. Janet, you wanted to speak. Sorry, have we gone through all questions now? I should check that with you. In that case, we'll move to comments. And Janet, you did indicate you wanted to comment.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think that, obviously we are reminded, and rightly so, of our obligation to consider only the changes that have been brought before us today. I do think, though, that it has been important and relevant to refer to the original application. It's obvious from the strength of feeling amongst residents that the impact of this building, albeit having been approved, it is going to be significant. Arguably, it's inappropriate for a conservation area. And in its impact to non-designated heritage assets nearby, but that ship's now sailed. I do feel, though, that by looking at these sort of what appear to be small changes, they are going to have quite significant effects on the residents who are going to have to live with these. The balcony that we've just been discussing is a further intrusion into the space and the privacy of people who have so far enjoyed living in, you know, a space which is now going to be significantly different to what they've been used to before. So, and I still don't really feel convinced that we've heard any persuasive argument as to why that balcony is necessary. I suppose in a way similarly with the green wall, you know, is it tokenism? Have we got, and I'm not entirely convinced that there is a significantly strong enough obligation there upon the developers to further to take the responsibility for the upkeep and maintenance of that, which I think is important. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if it is simply a requirement that somebody shall maintain it in the future, I think that should be tightened up and make it the you know, a responsibility of a named body. So, you know, given that, I do feel that, you know, I know we are where we are, but these changes, I'm not persuaded, are going to really have any significant alteration to the building, other than to have a negative impact on on local residents, which is why I didn't feel able to support the proposal for the screen. You know, to me, I don't feel that it's appropriate to have that balcony there again. So having said all that, whilst acknowledging the fact that, you know, permission has been granted for that development, I do feel that on this occasion I shall not be in favour of these proposals for the reasons I've just mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janet. Anyone else wish to comment? I see Brian and Marianne's hands have gone up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you actually, Janet. You've actually took a lot of the words out of my mouth, because I think there are some significant changes here. The balcony is certainly one of them, and I'm not happy about that situation with the balcony, and I don't think a screen resolves it. It can be all sorts of different screens. It's got to be really tightly drawn, and it can still be circumvented. There are other issues which we've not even got into. We'll be here till 6:30 if we keep going, which are to do with the bike storage, which has been altered, and a range of other things such as the bins. We've not started talking about the courtyard and the impact on the courtyard, some of these things, including the balcony. I mean, this section 73 is not an improvement in my opinion. I've looked through it. There are multiple small changes, which I've just mentioned. So I won't be voting for this application, this change, on those grounds. Multiple small changes.
I think the bike store was moved up and out of the basement to make it more convenient for bike users, but because they had to go along quite a long corridor. But I take the point that you're making.
I think there are some alterations in numbers of bikes that can be stored there. That was what I was going to ask about, you know, if we carried on for another hour.
Marianne, you have some comments?
Thank you, Chair. Similar, actually. You know, I think the variation of condition 2 just appears to create more detriments than benefits. It's going to cause additional harm to the local residents. We've already established that, you know, there's going to be loss of amenity from the substantive application. I'm worried about the cumulative impact. I think that's something that Richard referred to, the creep being beyond reasonable. You know, it's already a contentious application, and now the developer wants to vary it. So for those reasons, I think I won't be voting for this.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment? If not, we'll go to a vote. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my comment is really about the report, and this isn't a criticism because I know the structure's there, but reading this report as a layperson, I would think it comes across to me that there is an implication that we're looking at the whole application. Now, I know we're not, but the way if you start reading it, the way it talks about full planning application, grant conditionally recommendation. I know what's coming, but for a lot of people, they may not. And I think that, I suppose my comment is, could we look at possibly, when these come up again, that something is clarified, that this, what we're actually being asked to do.
Chair, it might just be useful for me to just come in here about the Section 73 application, because some things have been said that, whilst in the spirit of things, you know, aren't really wrong, if you like, but a Section 73 application is a separate permission. So if members grant this today, what the developer will have then is the existing permission and the new Section 73 permission. So it's not varying an existing permission, if you like. But Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, which is what we're talking about, that specifies that you can only talk about the condition, you're only really asked to look at these conditions. So you either grant it with these new conditions, or you decide the existing permission with the existing conditions is what this development should be, because these changes have an impact that you're not happy with. So in terms of if members were to refuse this application, you were going to talk about why you've refused it. It would be a case of articulating why you feel that these changes are unacceptable, as opposed to things that are more about the principles of the development. So if everybody's content with that. So just in terms of the report, it is a new planning application, but it's within the bounds of Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act. Thank you, Chair.
So it's either or, Richard. That's basically. No, not at this stage. Sorry, Anne. Marianne.
Could we have a recorded vote for this, please?
Give me 2 seconds. Yes.
So we're being asked to vote on this Section 73 planning application for 39 Charles Street. And so can I see a show of hands for all of those of you?
No, if we're doing a recorded vote, we have to go round.
Ah, yes, yeah. Rather than take the names of, yeah. Okay. That means I'll be...
We need, sorry, 1/3 of the members, so we need...
Sorry, for recorded votes, if not less than 10 members present at a meeting, in case of meetings of other bodies, 1/3 of the members present demand it.
Yeah.
So we need a vote on the number of people who want to take a recorded vote, is what you're saying.
You can do that by show of hands.
Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour of a recorded vote? Easily got a third for that. Lovely. Thank you for that. Abby is writing down your names so that she can keep track. Oh, we've got a minute.
Okay, I'll be brief. Yeah, you mentioned that if we were minded to decline this application, we'd obviously have to give reasons. Can we specify one element of it that we feel that we're unhappy ambiguous, or do we have to say everything? We don't like any of it.
We would need to decide why you were refusing it, and the reasons for that. So essentially, as you know with these things, what can happen is if you refuse an application, then the applicant can then appeal that, and they appeal those reasons for refusal. So it's sensible to make sure that you record all the reasons why you're refusing it, rather than just pick one, if you genuinely do have more than one reason for refusal, obviously. But just as again to bear in mind that section 73 2b says that in terms of refusing an application like this, it's because you decide that planning permission should be granted subject to the same conditions as those to what the previous permission was. So obviously in terms of your reasons, it would be irrational to have a reason that actually was something that would perceived benefit, if you like, to neighbours in this section 73 compared to the existing permission. So that's the point there. Thank you, Chair.
We are ready to take a vote, and I'm going to start with Alan.
Against, Chair.
For.
For, Chair.
For.
For, Chair.
Against.
Against, Chair.
For, Chair.
For, Chair.
Against, Chair.
For. The vote for this application has carried. Thank you very much for your patience with that. We now come on to item 11, a record of planning appeals and submissions and decisions. Do we have anyone here to speak on that today?
I just offer it out if there are any questions, Chair.
Well, I will say it was good to see that you're showing a good record of of getting appeals through in favour of the council. So I thank you for that. Do people want to raise anything else on that, or can we move on to item 12, date of the next meeting, which will be Tuesday the 14th of October, 2:25 at 2 p.m. in the Town Hall. And most likely any site visits are going to be the day before, on Monday the 13th. 2025. To clarify. Thank you all very much.